there comes a time, and the time for you is now because you're watching this video, that if you've done enough of the harvesting of energy from the 3D grid, because we're all here kind of doing a piece of it, whatever big issues upset you, or whatever stuff you've been going through personally in your personal processing work, or if you've used like Ben the Matrix to really get into the big story situations going on, you've been doing your part to harvest that energy out. And even though the 3D grid energy field is sort of still there and it's still generating some storylines a lot of the collective are experiencing, if you're watching this video, it's your turn to really move on to the 5D grid, because we need to have the 5D grid kind of populated, if you will. We need to have, you know, people up here in their hearts and in their creative expression, bringing more and more energy into the 5D grid, because I'm drawing everybody's little heart centers, because that now is what is going to build stronger attraction than this 3D grid. So all the people that you might be worried about that are still down here struggling around in the 3D, if we build this 5D grid, we're strengthening that energetic field, we're making it more magnetic. And this is, I think, where people are getting the idea of ascension from in a split. We don't use the language ascension because it's really kind of clouded with a whole bunch of biblical ideas, but this is where I think this concept is coming from, that as people move more into their hearts, as they feel that resonance coming from the 5D grid people, the heart center people, they start elevating, they start being more attracted to move into it. But there's always this sort of point where you're half in, half out, right? You're still doing some 3D stuff, you're still seeing 3D stuff you don't like, but you're also in 5D. And at a certain point, when you've built up your 5D energetic field, it's time to actually de-anchor. It's time to not be living in this kind of half place, which is somewhere between the 3D and the 4D grid. 5D grid. I'll explain the 4D in a minute here. Or maybe we'll save that for another video, actually. Basically, it's the mind projected into the multi-dimensional realm, which is why everybody gets kind of crazy up in there. So it's time to really go, I'm pulling out of the 3D matrix. I'm de-anchoring. And what de-anchoring is, if you imagine that wherever you are, you're sort of plugged into the grid in order to just exist here on Earth. Now, these people are plugged into the 5D grid, but we still have little anchors into, so you can be basically going like, I'm moving on to the 5D grid, I'm doing this, but some of your storylines are still plugged in to, like these people would have some of their storylines generated, anchored in the 3D grid, right? And some of their storylines are anchored in the 5D grid. Those people, like, think of it like a rainbow. The 4D grid, the 3D grid is the blue section. It blends into the 5D grid like a rainbow blends. It doesn't just go from one color to the other. And so these people who are sort of somewhere between the two, they're part of their storylines are being generated from the 5D grid energy system, and some of them are still being generated from the 3D grid energy system. And in order to really get into the 5D grid and to really live in the 5D grid potentialities, you have to de-anchor with your free will. This is your free will now saying, you know what, I'm ready to release. I'm choosing to release the anchors into the 3D grid.